Welcome back. Dr. Robert Melillo has been helping children overcome learning disabilities for over 30 years. His areas of expertise include autism spectrum disorders, ADD, and so much more.
1 in 5 children in the U.S. has learning and thinking differences such as ADHD or dyslexia. 4 million children younger than 18 have learning disabilities in the United States. Dr. Rob, what is developmental functional neurology, neuroscience, and why did you develop this approach?
What really started with me with a question, which was what was happening in the brain of a child with ADHD. And the reason I wanted to know that was because my son was diagnosed with ADHD. And for me, I have a background in neurology and rehabilitation, but I didn't know what the actual problem was. And before I could even think about helping him, I needed to know what that was. So I spent, over 10 years researching that, eventually published a major textbook on it. And along the way, I found a unique approach to actually not only help my son, but help many, many other people.
What makes your approach to developmental issues unique or different?
I think that's it. It's that I've spent my life really understanding what is actually going on in the brain and how it gets that way. And our goal is to change that. I speak with parents all the time that children have a diagnosis of ADHD or autism. And I say to them, has anybody ever explained to you what's happening in their brain? And they look at me and they say, no, never. If a child has a heart problem or a liver problem or, a broken bone, you'll show a picture or an image. But a child gets that type of behavioral diagnosis and there's no answers given to parents. So it really starts with that, really understanding the research, doing the research, and then trying to address that core problem, which is really known as a functional disconnection syndrome.
Well, can you help us understand what is happening in the brain of a child or an adult with ADHD, autism, and other developmental issues?
Sure, really simply put, that fancy word functional disconnection really means that there's a problem with what we call functional connectivity between networks. Really simply put, it's an imbalance between the two hemispheres of the brain. There's no injury, there's no damage, there's no genetic mutation the majority of the time. It is simply a developmental maturational imbalance, meaning that one side of the brain is delayed in its growing. The right side grows first in the first 3 years primarily. If something interferes with that, it may cause, especially in very gifted kids, that their other side of the brain comes online too early, and it creates this developmental imbalance that prevents the two hemispheres from really integrating and communicating in a proper way. And the two hemispheres are designed to work perfectly in balance and integration. If they don't, they can produce basically any symptom we can see in any sort of behavioral or mental health issue, even many physical symptoms.
Dr. Rob, and I think Stephanie would agree, when I was younger and we were growing up, it just seems comparatively now, there are so many more kids being diagnosed with learning disabilities.
Yeah.
Why are we seeing that now?
Yeah, there actually is. My third book is really talks about the scientific truth under autism, and I really go through it in great detail. But the first chapter is: Are we actually facing an epidemic? 30 years ago, autism was diagnosed 1 in 30,000, and now it's less than 1 in 40, and at least 50% of those increases are real. Meaning these are new cases that never existed before. And that's the case for all of these developmental issues. I believe it's actually the most important social issue of our time. And most of it is a combination of different lifestyle factors. The same things that are causing an increase in obesity and diabetes and heart disease are the same things that are actually underlying this dramatic increase in developmental issues that are impacting the brain. The brain is the most sensitive organ to any sort of environmental influences. So if it affects any other part of the body, it's going to actually affect the brain first, especially during development. And again, these imbalances are more likely to happen in people with really gifted abilities in one side. And so it's really built on a trait that is not a genetic mutation, but a natural trait that is an advantage at one level. But if it gets too much out of balance, it becomes a disadvantage.
Dr. Rob, how do you address this core issue and how can people find out more about your messaging?
Yeah, most of this starts really with movement. I mean, a lot of it is impacting movement, early development. The brain is, we're born with these things called primitive reflexes that allow children to root and suck and grasp and eventually roll over, hit their motor milestones, and then walk at around 1 year of age. And so these movement milestones engage their senses, start the stimulation process. And if these reflexes don't go away, they hold back brain development and the other side comes online too early. So dealing with early movement issues, and in movement, even many adults have these retained primitive reflexes. So the way people can get in touch with me is they can either contact my website through drrobertmelillo.com. They can book appointments there. They could also read my first book, Disconnected Kids, which has been translated into 18 languages. Also, Instagram is a big way if they want to see my work at Dr. Robert Melillo. And I have a big TEDx talk coming back out in a couple of days called "What's Happening in the Brain of a Child with ADHD." So, those are the main ways they can get in touch with me.
Dr. Rob, we will definitely want to check out that TED Talk. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll be right back.